The Survivors is brought to you by our friends at the HelpHUB. This podcast mentions suicide, mental illness, grief, and loss, and may be triggering for some listeners. So please take care of your mental well-being by pausing or skipping any sections that feel uncomfortable to you. And if you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988 for support. I hate it when you try and make me laugh right as you're hitting the record button.
I couldn't help it. I was about to burp.
You need to learn how to control yourself is the whole issue. No, don't do that. Nobody wants to hear that. It's not why they're here.
I didn't.
All right, let's just consider this a blooper roll, and we'll just keep going. So I'm ignoring what you're doing because you're trying to throw me off. I can see it. I can feel it. All right, so here's the topic today, because you and I talked about this offline, and we wanted to continue the Mental Health Awareness Month conversation because we're still here in the month of May, and we're still talking about amplifying resources and what can people find out in the world that can be a source of support and a source of guidance when they're not okay. And what you and I discovered, each individually on our own, is the value and importance of therapy.
Amen.
And that, you and I were like, okay, well, so what should we talk about in this episode for Mental Health Awareness Month? And then both of us were kind of like, well, that's obvious. We haven't talked at all yet about the value of therapy. And let me tell you, I'm really going to do my very, very best not to shout out my therapist by name because I don't want to horribly embarrass her, but because she has a very unique name. Let's just say that she has become such a vital part of my life. She has become such an important part of my mental health and wellness journey. She has guided me, helped me, supported me in ways that I didn't even realize I needed. And as a result, she and I just had this conversation, I think it was last week or the week before, where I said, I really feel more centered. I feel more grounded. I feel more authentically myself than I think I may have ever felt in my life. And I've been seeing her now for 3 years. And every week that I get to sit with her, whatever it is that we're talking about is a gift. I think it's probably, for me, it's probably the greatest act of self-care, or one of the greatest acts of self-care that I've ever gifted to myself. And I say it that way very intentionally because there are so many different things that we can do for ourselves in regard to self-care. And I'm not sure that people often put therapy on that list. Like people think, I'll get a massage, or I'll get my nails done, or go to a yoga class, or buy myself a treat. We don't think of it in terms of therapy as a gift, but I don't know about you, but that's how I feel about it. And I am so grateful to myself that I went seeking it out at 53 years old after 30 years of being away from therapy. Greatest thing I ever did.
100%. Like the night, like a couple hours after I called 988, that's when I had gone ahead and scheduled an appointment with a therapist. Okay, so I'm just going to coin the phrase from my co-host, Dirty Skittles. I had to speed date my therapist, meaning I had to go through 3 different therapists before I found the one that worked for me. And my therapy is different. I do different types of therapy. I do talk therapy. I do art therapy. I do a little nature therapy. I do a lot of writing. But therapy was a game changer for me because it was somebody that was unbiased, right? Like, we can all talk to our friends, we can talk to our family members, we can talk to our spouses, but they all have a biased opinion. And sometimes they don't have the right tools to help us in that moment. That's where my therapist comes in. It was a game changer for me. And the therapist I have now, I've had her now for 2 years. Amazing. Like, when I got really depressed again in November, I was able to go back and use the tool, like pull out the tools out of my tool chest that my therapist had taught me and I was able to use them to get past the anxiety and the depression that I was feeling. But she also helped me to open up because for the first time, everybody knew how I felt. And I didn't keep it all bottled up in the normal extroverted way, right? Like, this time I did display the resting bitch face. I was able to be authentic to myself and be very, very vulnerable and figure out that, hey, I'm not okay. And I wouldn't have had those tools if I hadn't gone to therapy.
Yeah. It really is. I think for so many people, that change agent that can bring you from that place of paralysis, like emotional paralysis, when you don't know where to turn, you don't know what you're feeling, you don't know how to navigate through it, you can't see that there's another side to it, and then you bring in a therapist. And like you said, not every therapist is created equally, not every dynamic is a good dynamic. This is not to say that therapists are good or bad. It's just everybody interacts in different ways and has different vibes and chemistry together. And sometimes you get it right on the first try, and sometimes you got to shop around a little bit for everybody's sake. And I'll tell you, I happened to wasn't really even looking for a therapist. It was kind of there in my mind, but I come at life from the perspective of a mom, and I have a husband and a family and kids, and you tend to put yourself last, like dead last. And I always did in that way, like always prioritized the girls, always prioritized Dave, needed to make sure my people were all good, had this like hyper vigilant personality that always needed, you okay? You okay? Everybody okay? What do you need? What can I do? And I do, my therapist and I joke about that a lot, but it's a real legitimate side of my personality. And it comes from a place of just always kind of thinking about everybody else before I think about myself. And I remember I had this conversation with a really dear friend of mine, and we were talking about trauma, and we were talking about she has two children who see the same therapist that I see, and she knows me so well. And when I said to her, I think, I'd love to find a therapist. I just, don't know who to go to these days. This was a few years ago. It was still pandemic-y times. You just kind of, flooding therapist's office. You couldn't get appointments, and you had to know somebody. And she just was the right person at the right time. And this friend of mine said, I think you'd really vibe with this therapist we go to in my family. And I said, okay, maybe I'm taking this as a sign. I'm reading the room, and the universe is saying, there's somebody out there for you right now. So I made that call, and I mean, immediately, like within the first few minutes of sitting together, I knew that this was a person I felt comfortable with. And this was a person who had perspective and opinions and input that would be valuable to me. And God, like that, I think about in those early days of seeing her and kind of sharing who I was and going through the kind of, get to know you phase kind of sessions that last for a while in the beginning. I just remember what it felt like, how liberating. That's the thing that stands out to me the most in the very beginning, after so many decades since the last time I went to therapy, when I was like, 22 and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And that's when I went to therapy. It was not about, anything other than, I don't know what I want to do with my life. Can you help me? So then 30 years goes by and I haven't seen anybody. And now I'm, a 50 something year old woman back in the therapist's office. And I just remember thinking about it like, holy shit, I get to talk about my stuff, like my stuff. I get to, I don't have to listen right now. I can actually be the one to share. And it took a while. Like it took a while for me to kind of settle into that. Like, wait a minute, this is my hour. This is my time. So used to listening to everybody else. And what that did for my heart and what that did for my capacity to understand myself, I don't think there's enough time for us in the rest of the month of May to talk about how that went, the impact of that. But yeah, it's the greatest thing I ever did for myself.
Amen. The greatest thing I ever did for myself, too. And then it opened my eyes to different kinds of therapy, right? Like I do EFT, I do tapping because I'm finding I have a little anxiety. I've done art therapy. Like the best thing in the world is to draw out your anxiety, draw out your anger. Maybe go get some clay, build something. But it in those types of therapies can take my head out of the situation that I'm in and focus on the task at hand. I also do nature therapy. I live on 8 acres of forested land, so I can go for a walk. I don't go for a walk from like November till like April because there's usually snow on the ground. That's a whole nother story. But getting out into nature or fishing is very therapeutic to me. Find the things that work for you, because sometimes, like person to person therapy is not going to work for you, but there's so many different kinds of therapy out there, and I'm a huge advocate for it. Find those resources that are available out there and do it for you. Don't do it for anybody else. Do it for you, because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live inside your head. And if you can get some of that shit that's going on in your head out, whether it's talking to somebody, drawing it, walking it off, spending time in nature, any of those things, it's still considered therapy. A huge proponent. Like, I went to therapy before everything went down. It's probably the same as Sugar did, like 30 years ago. But I knew at the time, when all the shit finally came to a head, that I couldn't do it myself. And as much as I love my wife and my friends and my colleagues, they weren't going to be able to help me. They didn't have the tools in their tool chest to get me out of that really dark place. And it took me a long time to just feel comfortable in my own skin again.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. You just said something that made me think of things in terms of a parent. Like, I feel like talking to family when you're struggling and you're stressed out and how we don't really connect in the same way with our family that we would with, a trained professional, is a lot like when you try to get your kids to listen to you when you're a parent, and they'll listen to like everybody but you. Like, you could literally say the same words that someone else in the universe says, and they'll be like, "You're wrong. It's not true. That won't work." And then all of a sudden they listen to somebody else and they're like, "Oh, wow, like that was so helpful." And you just want to like wring their little necks because you just literally said the same thing. It's like that with, with our trauma, with our stress. Like, the people who are closest to us have a different perspective. We know they have a different perspective. They have a different way of engaging with us. They may say things that are maybe more hurtful or more toxic or more invasive than a therapist would say. And I just think about kind of the relationship that I have with my therapist. She's not there trying to, give me, spoon feed me the answers. That's not what therapy is. That's certainly not what my experience with therapy has been. It's more like the answer lies within the question. When I find myself asking her a question, it's almost like, she's a guide. What she has helped me to recognize in the 3 years that we've been together. I'm not sure I ever would have recognized had I been left kind of alone in my own head with my own resources. And the irony is, like, so, for anyone who's listening to us for the first time, G and I are two different kinds of survivors. You're an suicide attempt survivor. I'm a suicide loss survivor. I never imagined myself, I never identified as a trauma survivor in my life until my therapist was like, "You're a trauma survivor, right?" And I was like, "You're talking to me? Me?" It never clicked. And it's like the most obvious, ridiculous thing to miss, but I never connected those dots. So I never thought about it. And that was insanely eye-opening to me. That kind of reclassified everything for me in that moment. I would never have gotten to that point, I don't think, if I hadn't had a therapist. I just don't think I would have. The other thing that I remember so profoundly, and this happened kind of recently, like within the past year, we were talking. So I, along with losing my cousin and a close childhood friend to suicide, I lost my father, but I didn't learn that my father died by suicide for 35 years. So that's part of my story. And what's interesting, my therapist and I were kind of going back over that period of time when my father died. The first time he died, because I've lost him twice. So the first time he died, I was 10 years old. I was told it was a heart attack. I was grieving the loss of my best friend in the world. I had no siblings. And it never dawned on me until I was probably 55 years old in therapy that I never actually grieved my father's death when I was 10 years old. Never even occurred to me. And it was because my therapist asked me the simplest question, said, "Who was asking you how you were when you were a kid? Like, who was asking if you were okay?" And don't get me wrong, my mother, and my mother. My mother is the greatest human of all time. She was the most devoted, loving, loyal, present mother, supported me in every possible way. But nobody else was asking me if I was okay. Like, I was a fourth grader and I didn't have a single solitary conversation with a single soul, not a teacher, not a student, friend, no one, about my father dying. It was like, I walked into school that September. I lost my father in August. I walked into school in September as the only kid in my fourth grade. the entire school who didn't have a dad. And I was completely isolated from that point in time on. And my therapist made me realize I had never actually grieved my father's death because nobody was there to grieve it with me. So those kinds of epiphanies, like, that's what therapy's all about. Struggling with your mental health, feeling lost, overwhelmed, or just alone? Well, you're not. Welcome to the HelpHUB, your online destination for mental health resources, content, and tools to help you navigate whatever mental health challenges you are facing in the moment. At the HelpHUB, we offer individualized resources tailored to your unique needs and community, with over 16 different categories to find exactly the kind of personalized help you need when you need it most. Because even though we all deal with many of the same challenges, we don't always experience those challenges the same way. So whether you're looking for crisis support, downloadable resources, or an extensive archive of mental health-related articles and videos, we've got you. From episodes of the Survivors podcast for suicide loss survivors and lived experience blogs to interactive tools and professional connections, the HelpHUB meets you where you are and helps you move forward with strength and support. Remember, you don't have to do this alone. Visit thehelphub.co today.
100%. I love my wife to death, but she wasn't equipped. She saw who I was through her own lens, but I needed something deeper and more significant for me to figure out, kind of what was going on with me. I had a lot of PTSD going on, didn't realize that was a thing. I had this deep set of depression, didn't know how to fix it. But I was given like these amazing tools and just to help me like to realize, myself and what was going on. And like one of the very first things that we talked about for me, because I'm an empath also, is setting boundaries. Like I wouldn't have known anything about that if I'd gone through therapy. And that's been a game changer and a life changer for me. And also, just I'm writing my book, right? I'm writing my book from what started happening in October of 2022 right up through like today. I was almost done. Then I quit my job and now I just rewrite the last chapter. But I learned so much about myself, not just through therapy, but through writing, because I found it to be very cathartic. You learn a lot about yourself when you write a book.
Ain't that the truth?
And just having that resource, right? Having that unbiased opinion, or just unbiased. It's not even an opinion. Somebody who's unbiased, who can listen to you and help you figure out the things that you really want to work on and give you tools to make those moments easier. So there's a lot of homework. I mean, I still do homework on myself today.
So do I, for sure.
Still growing, still learning. Will I change therapists? Probably not. I mean, I really love my therapist. She's made me feel, she gave me back that feeling of the way that everybody else sees me, right? And so all the goodness I put out into the world is now starting to come back to me. I've had a really hard time adjusting to that because that's just not how I think. But I wouldn't have had that epiphany without her. And I'm very thankful that I can go to therapy.
Yeah, it's definitely, I keep saying it in these terms, and it's true. It's a gift to be able to engage with someone that way and have such a safe, protected, nurturing space where you can really say anything and you can take advantage of the benefit of somebody else's education, someone else's knowledge in the field of psychology. There was so much about myself. Like I didn't know that I had a hypervigilant personality type, but my therapist had the words to explain the behaviors that had never been explained to me in that way before, and just unlocked this whole side of me that I never understood. So I mentioned it a little while ago that I am this hyper vigilant personality type where I'm always kind of running around behind everybody. Okay, everybody good. And I'm always putting myself dead last because I'm way more concerned with making sure that everybody else in my life is okay. And I didn't know why. I didn't know, that kind of haunted me for a long time. I didn't know where that behavior came from. But it was through conversations, lots and lots of conversations over the period of months with my therapist. And I finally got to a point where it was like, well, it's right there. That's why. It's because you were 10 years old and the person you loved the most at that time in your life, they left. They're gone now. And I've had other losses in my life. I mean, one of the things you and I actually have not yet talked about, we talk about, your attempt, and we talk about the 3 losses that I've experienced, but I've been accompanied by grief my entire life. I mean, it may have started when I was 9 years old, but the year that my father died, I think we lost something like 6 or 8 people in my family, on my father's side of the family, from various illnesses and situations. And so it felt for a time when I was a kid like all we ever did was go to funerals. All we ever did was have to pay condolence calls. Like, it was crazy at that time. And then, since then, losing grandparents and losing aunts and cousins and friends. And so it's been this kind of revolving door of grief. And I guess in my mind, I got wired as a very little kid to feel like, okay, I got to make sure everybody's okay all the time so they don't go anywhere. And it was just the simple fleshing out of that reason behind my behavior that all of a sudden unlocked something for me. And I was like, that's why I'm like that. That's why I do that. And it gave me permission to take a step back, to be a little less vigilant in that way. Didn't mean I wasn't present, didn't mean I didn't care anymore, didn't mean I didn't love these people. It just meant that I let myself off the hook as being responsible for their wellness, if that makes sense.
Like how I learned about setting boundaries, right? To protect my own mental health. And one of the things that I found through therapy is that it doesn't have to be person to person, right? There's also like text-based therapy. Now that we have all these amazing electronic tools at our disposal, like let's say you don't want to talk face to face with somebody. Okay, but you're more comfortable texting. You have those options now. Think of companies like Calmery. They have different types of therapy platforms, and giving you the ability to do text therapy versus talk therapy. That works for some people. For me, I need to be able to see the person I'm talking to. I never, prior to, my suicide attempt, I had never thought about it. But I need somebody to listen to me because sometimes I have these crazy ideas in my head, right? And I need to like validate the crazy part. Having a therapist, because for me, like I need to be able to read people's facial expressions to figure out like, am I really fucking crazy, or is this just like a normal thought process? And I love that. But I also like engage in my other therapies, energy healing. I've done EFT. I've done, like I said, art therapy. I've done them all. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning about myself. I'm still learning how to deal with PTSD because that sits with you for a really long time. And I'm fortunate that we get to talk about this now because it is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? Like, just check it out. Check out the Calmery. Check out what's out there available for you, what you can afford, what works for you. Because, like I said, not every type of therapy works for everyone. So find the one that works for you.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm really glad you mentioned Calmery, who obviously is supporting. You heard at the top of our episode that this episode and so much of this season has been brought to you by our friends at Calmery. They are one of the standout online mental health counseling platforms out there in the world. And like you said, they kind of bridge the gap for a lot of people. A lot of like you and I are fortunate. We have the means to find a therapist, to support therapy. We have things like insurance and the capacity to, to afford something like a therapist. But there are a lot of people out there in the world who don't, who just for whatever reason do not have insurance that allows them to do that. And they have to rely on different outlets. And there are companies like Calmery who will make those opportunities to talk to a counselor so accessible, not only by bringing that counselor to you virtually so you can have a conversation face to face in a protected environment, but they also make it affordable. Like, you're not spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars at a time for an hour-long session. You can support that financially because they make it possible to do that. And so we're very lucky to live in an age where we have all these different modalities for getting support. I think that, like you said, it's just a matter of kind of try things out, see what fits, see what works. Are you a text person? Are you a face-to-face person? Are in-person person? Are you in a screen person? There are so many different ways now that we can get the help that we need. It's really just a matter of exploring what those ways are and taking advantage of them. And, you know, no one says you have to do one or the other. You can do 10 different things if that suits you. It's like you said yourself, you've got like an arsenal of things that you use, which is great, you know? I think for a lot of people, they're just, you know, they're afraid. There's that little stigma that still exists when you talk about going to therapy. Like I talk about my therapist like she's a, you know, she's a rock star because I feel so grateful to be able to work with her. And, you know, I feel like it's benefited me so much. But, you know, we have to kind of learn how to sidestep that stigma and just do the thing for ourselves that will support us in the ways that we need to be supported. In therapy, man, that is one of the big ones.
For sure. And, you know, in almost every city or every county, there is a mental health office. You can reach out to those resources. 9 times out of 10, they have a free resource that you can use. Use those resources. And we'll include some information in our show notes on how to find those resources.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that people can take advantage of, if you're curious about things like online therapy and you're curious about platforms like Calmery, we have a beautiful relationship with them. They have gifted us a discount code for anybody who's part of the Survivors podcast community, and that's in the show notes. So, you know, there are ways to explore these things, give them a try, pick what works for you, and lean into those things because they're there for us to make life easier.
Hey, man, what a powerful conversation this was.
I feel like everyone is powerful.
I think so, too. I can't wait to talk to you next week.
I know. I'm going to miss you between now and then. Okay. Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on The Survivors. Remember, no matter how tough things feel, you are enough, and the world needs you just the way you are. You're not alone in this journey. There's a community here, and every step forward counts. We're so grateful you took the time to listen, and we hope you'll take one day at a time. Just know there's always more light ahead.
Thanks for being here, friends. Just remember, help is out there in so many different places. So if you or someone you know is struggling, please call 988 and a trained crisis counselor like me will be there to help. You can also find an inclusive and comprehensive directory of mental health resources, tools, and content at the HelpHUB.co. Just remember that help is always just a call or a click away. We'll catch you next week. In the meantime, keep surviving.